Self-Discipline Audiobook. Introduction. In a world where distractions are endless, quick fixes are glorified, and instant gratification is often prioritized over long-term rewards, self-discipline emerges not merely as a trait but as a vital life skill, perhaps even a superpower, that underpins the achievement of every meaningful goal. The introduction to this audiobook on self-discipline sets the tone for a transformative journey into the mindsets, habits, and actions that shape a focused and purpose-driven life. It opens with a simple but powerful truth. Talent, intelligence, and luck may open doors, but it is self-discipline that keeps them open and helps you walk through them. Many people aspire to success, health, better relationships, or financial freedom, but few realize that the bridge between desire and achievement is built with consistency, commitment, and control, hallmarks of disciplined behavior. The author introduces the concept of self-discipline not as an abstract ideal reserved for elite performers or highly motivated individuals, but as a trainable skill that anyone can develop with time, awareness, and effort. From the outset, listeners are encouraged to shift their perspective. Rather than seeing discipline as punishment or self-denial, it's framed as the ultimate act of self-respect, choosing long-term growth over momentary comfort. The audiobook emphasizes that discipline is not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about showing up again and again, even on the days you don't feel like it. This introduction breaks down the myths surrounding motivation, noting that motivation is fleeting and unreliable. It rises and falls with your mood, your environment, or even the weather. Self-discipline, on the other hand, is steady. It is the inner compass that keeps you aligned with your goals when motivation disappears. The author uses relatable examples, drawing from everyday life, like waking up early to work out, resisting junk food, studying when others are relaxing, or saying no to unnecessary purchases, to illustrate how small decisions made consistently define who we become. There's a compelling case made for why self-discipline is essential in every area of life: physical health, mental clarity, emotional stability, productivity, personal relationships, and even financial well-being. The introduction highlights that while external achievements are visible and celebrated, they are simply the byproducts of inner discipline, which is often unseen and unacknowledged. Listeners are challenged to reflect on their current habits, routines, and belief systems, questioning how often they allow impulse, fatigue, or fear to derail their progress. The author invites the listener to think of discipline as a muscle, one that gets stronger the more you use it, especially in moments of discomfort or difficulty. There's also a candid acknowledgement of how hard self-discipline can be, particularly in modern society, where everything is designed to grab our attention, shorten our patience, and make us crave ease. But instead of presenting this reality as an obstacle, the audiobook frames it as an opportunity to stand out, to rise above the noise, and to take control in a world that thrives on chaos. Listeners are reminded that developing discipline is not a linear journey. There will be setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt, but these are not signs to quit, they are signs of growth. By embracing discomfort, leaning into resistance, and building mental toughness, you slowly rewire your brain for persistence, resilience, and focus. The introduction also touches on the science behind self-discipline, including the role of the prefrontal cortex in decision-making, the impact of dopamine on reward systems, and how habits form through repetition and consistency. This grounding in neuroscience helps listeners understand that discipline is not just about willpower, it's about systems, structure, and strategy. Importantly, the author emphasizes compassion alongside discipline, reminding listeners that being too rigid or self-critical can backfire, and that sustainable progress comes from a balance of accountability and self-kindness. Ultimately, this introductory chapter acts as a wake-up call and a motivational push. It's about reclaiming agency over your time, energy, and potential. It's about realizing that while you can't control every outcome, you can control your actions, your choices, and how you respond to adversity. With the right mindset, tools, and determination, anyone can become more disciplined, more focused, and more in control of their life. The author doesn't promise overnight transformation but rather a roadmap to gradual, meaningful change. The listener is invited to commit, not just to finishing the audiobook but to showing up for themselves in a deeper, more intentional way. By the end of the introduction, the tone is clear. This isn't just a book you listen to, it's a challenge to take ownership of your life, to break the cycle of excuses, and to build a foundation of habits and beliefs that support who you want to become. With this strong, clear, and motivational opening, the stage is set for the chapters ahead to dive into practical strategies, psychological insights, and real-life applications that help turn the theory of self-discipline into everyday action. Chapter 1. Understanding Self-Discipline. Dives into the foundational concept of self-discipline, aiming to clarify what it really is, and just as importantly what it isn't, by stripping away the misunderstandings that often surround it. It begins by defining self-discipline as the ability to control one's emotions, behaviors, and impulses in order to achieve long-term goals, even when doing so is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unenjoyable in the short term. Unlike motivation, which is often fleeting and dependent on mood or external circumstances, self-discipline is internal, consistent, and steady. It's what keeps you going when motivation fades. This chapter makes it clear that discipline is not about being harsh, robotic, or joyless. It's about creating a life built on intention rather than reaction, on purpose rather than impulse. The author explains that self-discipline is not something you're born with or without. It's a learnable, trainable skill that strengthens over time with use, much like a muscle. This reframing helps remove the sense of shame or inadequacy that many people feel when they fail at being disciplined. The chapter goes on to dismantle the myth that discipline equals perfection. In fact, disciplined people make mistakes too. They just don't let those mistakes define them or throw them completely off course. Instead of giving up, they course correct and keep going. There's an emphasis on the small, everyday decisions that build the foundation for greater self-control. Getting out of bed when the alarm rings instead of snoozing, choosing a healthy meal over fast food, starting a task instead of endlessly scrolling on your phone. These may seem minor, but the author argues they are the exact moments where discipline is either built or broken. This chapter also explores how our environment, upbringing, and early experiences shape our relationship with discipline. If someone grew up in a chaotic household or was never taught the value of routines, they might struggle more with creating structure in adulthood, but that doesn't mean they're doomed. It just means their starting point is different, and that awareness itself is powerful. The author introduces the idea of self-discipline as a form of delayed gratification, the ability to postpone immediate pleasure in favor of a greater reward down the road. Referencing psychological studies like the famous marshmallow test, the chapter explains how children who were able to delay gratification tended to have better outcomes later in life. However, it also reassures the listener that willpower can be developed at any age, and that change is always possible with the right mindset and practice. There's also discussion about the emotional side of discipline, how feelings of boredom, frustration, or insecurity often led us to sabotage our goals. People don't just lack discipline because they're lazy. Often they use distractions and bad habits to avoid discomfort or fear. This chapter invites listeners to lean into that discomfort instead of avoiding it, because facing it head-on is how discipline is developed. Self-awareness is positioned as the first step to self-discipline. You have to understand your triggers, excuses, and limiting beliefs before you can begin to replace them. The author suggests tracking your behaviors and identifying patterns where discipline breaks down, whether it's late-night snacking, procrastinating difficult tasks, or losing focus during work. By identifying these moments, you begin to take responsibility and regain control. Another key theme in this chapter is identity, the idea that disciplined behavior becomes easier when it aligns with how you see yourself. If you start to believe, "I am someone who follows through," or "I am someone who keeps promises to myself," then your actions begin to reinforce that identity. The author stresses that self-discipline is not a temporary fix to meet short-term goals. It's a lifestyle. It's about becoming the kind of person who does the hard things because they matter, not because you feel like doing them. And perhaps most powerfully, it's about building trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's hard, you strengthen that trust and self-respect. Conversely, every time you break that promise to yourself, you erode it a little. This concept of internal integrity is a recurring theme, showing how discipline isn't just about behavior, but about how you relate to yourself on a deeper level. The chapter touches on the broader consequences of undisciplined living, missed opportunities, broken commitments, unhealthy habits, and stagnant potential, and it doesn't shy away from the truth. If you don't choose discipline, you risk choosing regret. But rather than using fear as motivation, the author encourages hope, possibility, and a growth mindset. Discipline isn't about being rigid or punishing yourself into change. It's about loving yourself enough to choose what's best for your future, even when it's not what feels best right now. The chapter closes by encouraging the listener to reframe discipline as freedom, because when you have control over your actions, you gain freedom over your time, energy, and direction in life. You're no longer at the mercy of mood swings, distractions, or habits that don't serve you. This sense of autonomy, of being the author of your own choices, is empowering and life-changing. Ultimately, Chapter 1 serves as both a foundation and a call to action. It gives listeners the understanding they need to view discipline not as a burden, but as a powerful tool for transformation. It's not something to fear or avoid, it's something to embrace, practice, and grow into. And it's available to anyone willing to take the first step, not toward perfection but toward progress. Chapter 2. The Psychology Behind Discipline takes a deep dive into the psychology behind discipline, breaking down the mental, emotional, and neurological factors that influence our ability to stay focused, resist temptations, and stick to long-term goals even in the face of discomfort or distraction. It begins by addressing a fundamental truth. Self-discipline isn't just about grit or willpower, it's largely about understanding how the human brain works and using that knowledge to shape behavior in smarter, more sustainable ways. The chapter introduces the concept of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, planning, impulse control, and reasoning. This is where discipline is born. But this powerful executive center of the brain is constantly in battle with the more primitive parts, particularly the limbic system, which is driven by emotion and survival instincts, often pushing us toward short-term rewards, instant gratification, and comfort. This tug-of-war explains why we often know what we should do, yet still do the opposite. It's not a failure of character but a matter of brain chemistry and internal conflict. The author explains that discipline is essentially about strengthening the influence of the prefrontal cortex over the impulses triggered by the limbic system. This is why practices like mindfulness, meditation, and intentional habit building are so effective. They allow us to pause, reflect, and respond rather than react on autopilot. The chapter also explores dopamine, the neurotransmitter commonly associated with pleasure and motivation. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine isn't just released when we achieve something. It spikes in anticipation of reward, which is why we often find ourselves drawn to scrolling social media, binge-watching shows, or eating junk food. These behaviors are designed to hijack our dopamine system and offer fast, easy wins, tricking our brains into feeling accomplished without actual progress. The author warns that over time, this pattern makes it harder to enjoy or even stick to delayed rewards, like long-term health goals or personal development, because our brains are conditioned to expect constant stimulation and gratification. However, the good news is that we can retrain our brains through intentional behaviors, creating new neural pathways that favor discipline over distraction. One of the key psychological concepts introduced is habit formation, based on the loop of cue, routine, and reward. By understanding and manipulating this loop, we can break bad habits and form positive ones that support discipline. For instance, if the cue is stress and the routine is eating sugar, the reward is comfort. But that same cue can be redirected toward a healthier behavior like walking or journaling if we consciously swap the routine. The chapter emphasizes that awareness is everything. Once we can observe our automatic reactions without judgment, we create the space needed to make better choices. Another powerful idea explored is ego depletion, the theory that willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted throughout the day. While this idea has been debated in recent research, the practical takeaway remains. If your environment is full of temptations or your daily decisions are chaotic and reactive, your discipline will suffer. That's why routines, boundaries, and simplicity are key. By automating certain parts of your life, like meal prep, workout schedules, or work rituals, you can conserve mental energy and make discipline easier. The author also discusses how emotional regulation plays a huge role in discipline. People often break their commitments not because they don't care, but because they are emotionally overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, bored, or discouraged. Learning to sit with those emotions without immediately escaping into distractions is a core part of building mental toughness. Techniques like deep breathing, reframing negative thoughts, and delaying responses for even just 5 to 10 minutes can help break the cycle of impulsive decision-making. The chapter introduces cognitive behavioral principles such as identifying distorted thinking patterns, "I'll never change," "I already messed up, might as well quit," and replacing them with more empowering narratives. It also explains the importance of self-image and identity in psychology. When you begin to believe that you are a disciplined person, not just someone trying to be, you begin to act accordingly. This identity shift is more powerful than relying on fleeting motivation or forcing behavior. The author also touches on goal orientation, distinguishing between outcome goals and process goals. Discipline thrives when we focus on the process, what we can control today, rather than obsessing over distant results. This not only reduces overwhelm but also builds momentum, because progress becomes visible and achievable in the short term. Psychology also teaches us about delayed gratification, famously studied through the marshmallow test, and expanded in studies that show those who can delay reward tend to perform better in life. But the ability to delay gratification isn't fixed. It can be nurtured through small daily wins, mindfulness, and by making long-term rewards feel emotionally satisfying. The chapter brings in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself with repeated practice, as further proof that discipline isn't something you either have or don't. It's something you shape with repetition, just like building a muscle. The author encourages using small, consistent actions that stretch your comfort zone just slightly, instead of extreme, unsustainable changes. This approach reduces mental resistance and builds self-trust. A key takeaway from this chapter is that discipline is not about overpowering your psychology, it's about understanding it and working with it. When you know how your brain works, when you can anticipate moments of weakness, and when you have a plan for handling them, you stop feeling like a victim of circumstance and start feeling empowered. The author provides practical tools like visualization, temptation bundling, pairing a hard task with something enjoyable, and reward systems that align with psychological research to help reinforce disciplined behavior. Finally, the chapter concludes by emphasizing that the more we practice self-discipline, the easier it becomes. Not because life gets easier, but because we become stronger, more self-aware, and more in control. Discipline, at its core, is a psychological game, and the more you understand the rules of that game, the more you win, not just in terms of goals achieved, but in living a more conscious, intentional, and fulfilling life. Chapter 3. Building Better Habits. Shifts the focus from understanding discipline to implementing it through the creation of better habits, emphasizing that success is less about occasional grand gestures and more about the small, consistent actions repeated daily. The chapter begins by asserting that habits are the building blocks of self-discipline, serving as the invisible architecture of our lives. What we repeatedly do shapes who we become. The author highlights how many people rely too heavily on motivation, waiting to feel ready to take action, when in reality, success stems from systems and routines that function even when motivation is absent. This chapter breaks down how habits are formed through the well-known habit loop: cue, routine, and reward. First, there's a cue or trigger that signals the brain to begin a behavior. Then comes the routine, the behavior itself, and finally the reward, which reinforces the habit by satisfying a craving or providing pleasure. Once this loop is established and repeated enough times, the habit becomes automatic, requiring less mental effort and self-control. The author urges listeners to become more conscious of the loops already operating in their lives, many of which run unconsciously and lead to self-sabotaging patterns like procrastination, overeating, or negative self-talk. The chapter introduces the concept of habit stacking, which involves attaching a new desired habit to an existing routine to make it easier to remember and execute. For example, if you already brush your teeth every morning, you can add 2 minutes of gratitude journaling immediately afterward, letting the current habit serve as a trigger for the new one. This technique reduces friction, which is a major theme throughout the chapter. The idea that people are more likely to stick with good habits when they remove obstacles and make the desired behavior as easy and accessible as possible. The author suggests setting up your environment for success. If you want to read more, keep books in visible places. If you want to eat healthier, remove junk food from your home. If you want to work out, lay your gym clothes out the night before. These seemingly small adjustments play a massive role in shaping behavior because, psychologically, our brains are drawn toward the path of least resistance. The easier a behavior is to start, the more likely it will become a habit. In contrast, the harder it is to do something undesirable, the less likely we'll follow through. For example, if you delete distracting apps from your phone or log out of social media, that little bit of added friction makes it less tempting to mindlessly scroll. The chapter also introduces the 2-minute rule, which states that any new habit should take less than 2 minutes to start. This makes it less intimidating and more approachable. Going for a run becomes putting on your running shoes, writing a book becomes opening the document, and meditating becomes sitting on the cushion. These micro-habits build momentum and lower psychological resistance. The author explains that the goal isn't to do something perfectly from day one, but to establish the identity of being someone who shows up consistently. As these tiny habits stack up and become regular, they compound into massive results over time, echoing the principle of compound interest in personal development. One powerful analogy used in this chapter compares building habits to planting seeds. You won't see results immediately, but with patience, consistency, and care, the roots grow deep and eventually break through the surface. Many people fail to build habits because they expect immediate transformation, but true growth happens below the surface long before it becomes visible. The author encourages listeners to focus on process over outcome, emphasizing that showing up every day, even imperfectly, is more important than occasional perfection. Another key point is the importance of tracking progress and celebrating small wins. Whether it's crossing off days on a calendar using habit tracking apps, or simply writing in a journal, tracking provides visual feedback and reinforces consistency, which is deeply satisfying to the brain. It also helps prevent the all-or-nothing mindset. When people miss a day or two, they often feel like they've failed, which leads to giving up. But the chapter reminds us that missing once is a mistake, missing twice is the beginning of a new habit. So the key is always to return as quickly as possible, rather than spiraling into guilt or self-criticism. The author explores identity-based habits, where lasting change is achieved by focusing not just on what you want to achieve, but who you want to become. Instead of saying, "I want to run a marathon," say, "I am a runner." Instead of, "I want to write a book," say, "I am a writer." This identity shift is powerful because our brains are wired to act in alignment with our self-image, so when you repeatedly take actions aligned with your desired identity, you reinforce that belief, and that belief in turn motivates more aligned action. The chapter also touches on the importance of patience and resilience, explaining that habit change doesn't happen overnight, and setbacks are part of the process. Rather than viewing mistakes as failures, listeners are encouraged to treat them as feedback, opportunities to adjust and learn. Discipline, in this context, is not about being perfect, but about becoming someone who doesn't quit. There's also an exploration of social accountability and how surrounding yourself with people who share your values or goals can dramatically improve habit consistency. Whether it's a workout buddy, a writing group, or simply sharing your goals publicly, the psychological pressure of social norms and expectations can help reinforce disciplined behavior. Lastly, the chapter ends by reminding us that habits shape destiny. Every habit you build is a vote for the kind of future you want. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So if you want to live a disciplined life, don't just aim for big changes. Instead, build better systems, refine your daily routines, and focus on becoming 1% better every day. Over time, those tiny improvements add up to massive transformation. This chapter isn't just about understanding habits, it's about becoming intentional with them, using them to replace willpower with structure, and designing a lifestyle that supports who you want to become. Chapter 4. Overcoming Temptation and Procrastination. Addresses two of the most persistent enemies of self-discipline, temptation and procrastination, offering a psychological and practical deep dive into why we struggle with them and how to take back control of our attention, time, and energy. The chapter opens by acknowledging a universal truth. Everyone, no matter how disciplined, faces moments when temptation feels overpowering and procrastination creeps in, disguising itself as harmless delay or waiting for the right time. But rather than treating these struggles as personal flaws, the author reframes them as natural consequences of how our brains are wired, especially in today's world of constant stimulation, digital distractions, and endless convenience. Temptation often arises when we are emotionally vulnerable, tired, stressed, bored, or overwhelmed, and our brain seeks relief through short-term pleasure, which may take the form of scrolling social media, binge-watching TV, eating unhealthy snacks, or avoiding difficult work. These behaviors activate the brain's dopamine system, providing immediate gratification without requiring effort. Procrastination, meanwhile, is often rooted in fear, perfectionism, and discomfort. We avoid tasks not because we're lazy, but because they trigger anxiety, fear of failure, or self-doubt. Rather than confronting those uncomfortable feelings, we retreat into safer, more familiar activities, convincing ourselves that we'll do it later. The chapter introduces the idea of present bias, a psychological tendency to prioritize short-term rewards over long-term goals, even when we logically understand the long-term benefit. This is the core reason people delay working out, saving money, studying, or building skills. It's not enjoyable now, and our brains are wired to choose now over later. The author then dives into techniques to override this bias, starting with awareness. You must learn to recognize when you're being tempted or falling into procrastination loops. The moment you become conscious of what's happening, you create a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies the power to choose differently. One strategy discussed is temptation bundling, where you pair a want activity with a should activity. For example, only watching your favorite show while doing chores or listening to podcasts during a workout. This merges immediate gratification with long-term value, making it easier to stick with difficult habits. The chapter also recommends creating implementation intentions, which are simple, if-then plans that predecide your behavior before temptation strikes, such as, if I feel like skipping my workout, I will go for a 10-minute walk instead, or, if I feel the urge to check my phone during work, I will take 3 deep breaths and refocus. These small plans prepare your brain to respond automatically, reducing the mental friction of decision-making in the moment. Another powerful method is environmental design, which involves making bad habits harder and good habits easier by manipulating your surroundings. If you tend to procrastinate on your phone, leave it in another room while working. If junk food tempts you at night, don't bring it into the house. If social media derails your focus, use website blockers or app timers. The author emphasizes that willpower is limited, especially under stress or fatigue, so relying on pure self-control is not sustainable. Instead, set up your environment to support your goals and reduce the number of temptations you need to resist. The chapter also delves into time management techniques like the Pomodoro technique, working in focused 25-minute bursts followed by short breaks, time blocking and prioritizing tasks using the Eisenhower matrix, urgent versus important. These tools help structure your day so that your time aligns with your priorities, reducing the space for procrastination to sneak in. Another key idea explored is the emotional side of procrastination. The author explains that we often delay important tasks because we tie them to negative emotions, fear of failure, fear of judgment, or the belief that we're not ready or not good enough. The solution isn't to eliminate fear but to take action despite it. Action creates clarity and confidence, while inaction fuels anxiety and self-doubt. Even starting small, writing one sentence, doing 5 push-ups, reading 1 page, begins to dismantle the emotional resistance and builds momentum. There's a strong emphasis on the power of starting. The first few minutes of any task are often the hardest, but once you begin, the resistance fades. This is called the activation energy principle. You need a burst of energy to start, but once you get moving, it becomes easier to continue. The chapter also challenges the idea of waiting for motivation, asserting that motivation often follows action, not the other way around. Instead of waiting to feel inspired, the author suggests using discipline to take the first step, knowing that inspiration and flow usually come after. Another tool offered is visualization, where you mentally rehearse overcoming temptation or completing a task successfully. This helps prime your brain and reduce the fear associated with starting. The author discusses reward substitution, where you focus on the immediate emotional rewards of disciplined action rather than distant results. For example, you may not enjoy exercising for the sake of weight loss, but you can enjoy how accomplished and energized you feel afterward. By focusing on the near-term benefits, you train your brain to associate discipline with pleasure. Additionally, the chapter introduces self-compassion as a vital part of overcoming procrastination. Harsh self-criticism for giving in to temptation or delaying tasks often leads to shame, which can create a destructive cycle where you numb that shame with more procrastination. Instead, the author encourages treating yourself with kindness. Acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and return to the task without judgment. This mindset builds resilience and makes it easier to stay consistent over time. Lastly, the chapter concludes by reiterating that overcoming temptation and procrastination is not about being perfect. It's about building systems, strategies, and awareness that give you the upper hand. Every time you resist the easy choice and choose the right one, you reinforce your identity as a disciplined person, and over time, those choices become easier, automatic, and even enjoyable. By combining psychological insight with practical tools, the chapter empowers listeners to stop letting fleeting emotions run their lives and to take ownership of their time, attention, and direction, one disciplined decision at a time. Chapter 5. Morning Routines and Daily Structure. Focuses on the powerful impact of morning routines and daily structure in cultivating lasting self-discipline, highlighting that how you begin your day often sets the tone for everything that follows. The chapter opens by emphasizing that most highly disciplined and successful people don't leave their mornings to chance. They intentionally craft a structured routine that prioritizes focus, clarity, and momentum. Rather than waking up and reacting to life, scrolling social media, checking emails, or rushing out the door, the disciplined individual begins with intention, using the early hours to center their mind, activate their body, and align with their goals. The author explains the psychological and physiological reasons behind this. Early in the morning, your mind is less cluttered, willpower is at its peak, and distractions are fewer, making it the ideal time for activities that require focus, creativity, and reflection. By establishing a consistent routine, you conserve mental energy, reduce decision fatigue, and program your brain to operate efficiently, like running a reliable operating system. The chapter breaks down the essential elements of a high-performance morning routine, though it stresses there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What matters most is consistency and purpose. A solid morning structure typically includes a blend of physical, mental, emotional, and strategic activities. Physically, movement is key. This could be stretching, yoga, a brisk walk, or a full workout session. The goal is to wake up the body, increase blood flow, and trigger the release of endorphins and dopamine, chemicals that boost mood, motivation, and energy. Mentally, incorporating mindfulness, meditation, breath work, or even silence helps calm the nervous system, reduce anxiety, and develop present-moment awareness, training your mind to respond rather than react. Emotionally, practices like gratitude journaling or affirmations foster a positive mindset by reminding you of what's good in your life, what you're striving toward, and who you want to become. Strategically, the most disciplined individuals take a few moments to review their goals, set intentions for the day, and visualize success. This might include writing a short to-do list, reflecting on top priorities, or reviewing long-term objectives to create alignment between daily actions and overall vision. The author emphasizes the importance of starting small, especially for those new to morning routines. Trying to do everything at once often leads to overwhelm and burnout. Instead, begin with just 1 or 2 habits, such as waking up 30 minutes earlier, drinking water first thing in the morning, or journaling for 5 minutes, and then gradually stack new habits over time. This ties back to the habit stacking concept from earlier chapters, reinforcing that consistency beats intensity. Another powerful concept introduced is the anchor habit, a core part of your morning that grounds you and signals the start of a productive day. For some, it might be making the bed, meditating, or a short walk. Whatever it is, that one consistent action serves as a cue that the day is beginning on your terms. The chapter also explores how to structure the rest of the day to maintain momentum and discipline. It introduces the idea of time blocking, assigning specific hours to specific types of tasks, which protects your energy and attention from being hijacked by distractions or urgent but unimportant tasks. Structuring your day also means identifying your biological prime time, the window of the day when you feel most alert and focused, and reserving that period for deep work or high-priority goals. The author highlights that most people waste their most productive hours on emails, meetings, or mindless browsing instead of creating, building, or solving. Another cornerstone of daily structure is batching tasks, grouping similar tasks together to avoid context switching, which drains mental energy. For example, responding to emails at a set time each day rather than sporadically, or scheduling calls back-to-back instead of scattered throughout the day. These time-saving strategies minimize chaos and maximize control. The chapter also emphasizes the need for built-in breaks. Discipline doesn't mean working non-stop. It means working with intention. Strategic pauses, whether for a short walk, a few minutes of breath work, or even a mindful cup of tea, help reset your brain and prevent burnout. Just as important as your morning routine is your evening routine, which the chapter briefly touches on. It sets the foundation for the next day's success. Winding down properly by limiting screen time, reviewing your day, and preparing for tomorrow, like laying out clothes or planning your schedule, reduces stress and improves sleep quality, which directly affects your discipline and energy the next morning. Another key theme is the importance of rituals versus routines. While routines are task-based and practical, rituals add emotional and psychological depth. Turning a routine into a ritual, by lighting a candle during journaling, playing calming music while meditating, or savoring your morning tea, adds meaning, making the behavior more enjoyable and easier to sustain. The author acknowledges that life isn't always predictable, and not every day will go as planned, but the presence of structure gives you a solid foundation to return to when chaos strikes. Even partial adherence to a routine can create stability in the midst of uncertainty. The discipline of honoring a routine, even when you don't feel like it, trains your brain to follow through regardless of mood, reinforcing your identity as someone who is committed, resilient, and focused. Lastly, the chapter wraps with a clear reminder that the way you live your days is the way you live your life. Morning routines and structured days aren't just about productivity, they're about reclaiming control, building momentum, and becoming the kind of person who acts with intention rather than drifting through life. When you take command of your first hour, the rest of the day becomes easier to manage. When you create rhythm and structure, you free up mental space for creativity, growth, and joy. And when you master your time, you begin to master your outcomes. The chapter concludes with the encouragement to start where you are, build slowly, and remember that discipline is not about being rigid, it's about being deliberate. Chapter 6. Self-discipline in Relationships and Communication. Explores the vital yet often overlooked intersection of self-discipline and human connection, focusing on how mastering one's impulses, emotions, and responses can dramatically improve both personal and professional relationships. The author begins by dispelling the myth that self-discipline is a solitary pursuit, emphasizing that our habits, attitudes, and behaviors affect not just ourselves but everyone around us. partners, family, friends, coworkers, and even strangers. Relationships, whether romantic or platonic, thrive not merely on love or compatibility but on consistent, respectful, and intentional communication, which requires emotional self-control, empathy, patience, and the ability to delay gratification, core aspects of self-discipline. This chapter asserts that one of the most powerful expressions of discipline is the ability to pause before reacting. In emotionally charged moments, undisciplined people tend to lash out, shut down, or escalate conflict. In contrast, the disciplined individual practices the art of response over reaction. They create a gap between stimulus and reaction, allowing time for reflection, empathy, and better judgment. This is especially crucial during disagreements or misunderstandings, where it's easy to be consumed by pride, ego, or the need to be right. The author emphasizes that true strength in communication comes from managing your emotional state, choosing calm over chaos, listening over interrupting, understanding over assuming. Self-discipline in relationships also means resisting the urge to win every argument or prove your point at the cost of connection. It's about asking yourself in heated moments, do I want to be right or do I want to be understood? A question that reorients your intention from domination to collaboration. Discipline shows up in the form of active listening, which means being fully present, withholding judgment, and seeking to understand the other person's perspective before responding. This requires mental stillness and the ability to set aside one's own need to speak, which isn't always easy in a world filled with distractions and ego-driven communication. The author also speaks to the importance of boundaries. Discipline doesn't only apply to what you do, but also what you allow. Being clear, respectful, and consistent with your boundaries protects your energy and mental well-being and teaches others how to treat you. It takes courage and self-respect to say no, to walk away from toxic patterns, and to enforce standards in a relationship, whether that's about communication style, time, respect, or space. On the other side, it also takes discipline to honor others' boundaries and avoid becoming reactive, defensive, or dismissive when someone communicates their needs. The chapter delves into honesty and vulnerability as forms of disciplined communication, not in the raw, unfiltered sense of oversharing or brutal truth-telling, but in the thoughtful, responsible practice of sharing your authentic self with clarity and compassion. It takes immense self-discipline to be vulnerable without expectation, to express your needs without manipulation, and to listen to another's truth without deflecting or retreating. The author explains that emotionally mature, disciplined individuals do not rely on others to regulate their moods or fix their problems. Instead, they take responsibility for their own emotional state, knowing that projection, blame, or passive aggression only create distance. This concept, called emotional sovereignty, is a key theme. Your feelings are yours to own, and disciplined relationships flourish when both people approach connection from a place of internal balance rather than emotional dependency. In professional relationships, discipline manifests through accountability, punctuality, respectful dialogue, and the ability to give and receive feedback without ego. A disciplined communicator doesn't just speak well, they follow through on their word, show up prepared, and take ownership of their impact. The chapter also introduces the idea of delayed communication, where instead of engaging in conflict immediately when triggered, the disciplined person gives themselves space, whether it's a few minutes or hours, to cool down, process, and choose their words intentionally. This prevents unnecessary escalation and allows for more solution-focused conversations. Another powerful concept explored is empathy as a discipline. It's easy to judge, criticize, or dismiss others when they don't behave the way we expect. But choosing to look beyond behavior and seek the underlying emotion or unmet need behind someone's actions is a practice that requires conscious effort. The author encourages listeners to see communication as a skill that can be improved with awareness and consistency, just like any other discipline. He also warns against toxic communication habits like stonewalling, sarcasm, gaslighting, and passive aggression, which are rooted in emotional immaturity and lack of control. Instead, the disciplined individual practices assertiveness, the ability to express needs and feelings clearly and respectfully, without aggression or submission. One of the most overlooked disciplines in relationships is consistency, showing up regularly with kindness, follow-through, and integrity. Words mean little without consistent action, and trust is built through repeated experiences of respect, reliability, and care. The author shares that disciplined love is not grand, dramatic gestures. It's remembering the little things, honoring your promises, being emotionally available, and choosing your partner even on the hard days. The chapter also touches on the importance of self-discipline in parenting and mentorship, where your actions model behavior more than your words. A disciplined parent teaches emotional regulation by practicing it, teaches honesty by being honest, and teaches respect by offering it first. Finally, the chapter concludes with a reminder that relationships are mirrors, and discipline helps you respond to what you see with grace, not judgment. Every difficult interaction is an opportunity to practice patience, compassion, restraint, and clarity. Self-discipline doesn't kill passion or spontaneity, it creates the safety and structure where love, trust, and deep connection can truly thrive. In a world where reactions are fast, emotions run high, and attention is short, the ability to stay grounded, communicate intentionally, and love with purpose is a rare and powerful discipline, one that not only improves your relationships but transforms who you are in the process. Chapter 6. Self-discipline in Relationships and Communication explores the vital yet often overlooked intersection of self-discipline and human connection, focusing on how mastering one's impulses, emotions, and responses can dramatically improve both personal and professional relationships. The author begins by dispelling the myth that self-discipline is a solitary pursuit, emphasizing that our habits, attitudes, and behaviors affect not just ourselves but everyone around us: partners, family, friends, co-workers, and even strangers. Relationships, whether romantic or platonic, thrive not merely on love or compatibility but on consistent, respectful, and intentional communication, which requires emotional self-control, empathy, patience, and the ability to delay gratification, core aspects of self-discipline. This chapter asserts that one of the most powerful expressions of discipline is the ability to pause before reacting. In emotionally charged moments, undisciplined people tend to lash out, shut down, or escalate conflict. In contrast, the disciplined individual practices the art of response over reaction. They create a gap between stimulus and reaction, allowing time for reflection, empathy, and better judgment. This is especially crucial during disagreements or misunderstandings, where it's easy to be consumed by pride, ego, or the need to be right. The author emphasizes that true strength in communication comes from managing your emotional state, choosing calm over chaos, listening over interrupting, understanding over assuming. Self-discipline in relationships also means resisting the urge to win every argument or prove your point at the cost of connection. It's about asking yourself in heated moments, do I want to be right or do I want to be understood? A question that reorients your intention from domination to collaboration. Discipline shows up in the form of active listening, which means being fully present, withholding judgment, and seeking to understand the other person's perspective before responding. This requires mental stillness and the ability to set aside one's own need to speak, which isn't always easy in a world filled with distractions and ego-driven communication. The author also speaks to the importance of boundaries. Discipline doesn't only apply to what you do, but also what you allow. Being clear, respectful, and consistent with your boundaries protects your energy and mental well-being and teaches others how to treat you. It takes courage and self-respect to say no, to walk away from toxic patterns, and to enforce standards in a relationship, whether that's about communication style, time, respect, or space. On the other side, it also takes discipline to honor others' boundaries and avoid becoming reactive, defensive, or dismissive when someone communicates their needs. The chapter delves into honesty and vulnerability as forms of disciplined communication, not in the raw, unfiltered sense of oversharing or brutal truth-telling, but in the thoughtful, responsible practice of sharing your authentic self with clarity and compassion. It takes immense self-discipline to be vulnerable without expectation, to express your needs without manipulation, and to listen to another's truth without deflecting or retreating. The author explains that emotionally mature, disciplined individuals do not rely on others to regulate their moods or fix their problems. Instead, they take responsibility for their own emotional state, knowing that projection, blame, or passive aggression only create distance. This concept, called emotional sovereignty, is a key theme. Your feelings are yours to own, and disciplined relationships flourish when both people approach connection from a place of internal balance rather than emotional dependency. In professional relationships, discipline manifests through accountability, punctuality, respectful dialogue, and the ability to give and receive feedback without ego. A disciplined communicator doesn't just speak well, they follow through on their word, show up prepared, and take ownership of their impact. The chapter also introduces the idea of delayed communication, where instead of engaging in conflict immediately when triggered, the disciplined person gives themselves space, whether it's a few minutes or hours, to cool down, process, and choose their words intentionally. This prevents unnecessary escalation and allows for more solution-focused conversations. Another powerful concept explored is empathy as a discipline. It's easy to judge, criticize, or dismiss others when they don't behave the way we expect. But choosing to look beyond behavior and seek the underlying emotion or unmet need behind someone's actions is a practice that requires conscious effort. The author encourages listeners to see communication as a skill that can be improved with awareness and consistency, just like any other discipline. He also warns against toxic communication habits like stonewalling, sarcasm, gaslighting, and passive aggression, which are rooted in emotional immaturity and lack of control. Instead, the disciplined individual practices assertiveness, the ability to express needs and feelings clearly and respectfully, without aggression or submission. One of the most overlooked disciplines in relationships is consistency, showing up regularly with kindness, follow-through, and integrity. Words mean little without consistent action, and trust is built through repeated experiences of respect, reliability, and care. The author shares that disciplined love is not grand, dramatic gestures. It's remembering the little things, honoring your promises, being emotionally available, and choosing your partner even on the hard days. The chapter also touches on the importance of self-discipline in parenting and mentorship, where your actions model behavior more than your words. A disciplined parent teaches emotional regulation by practicing it, teaches honesty by being honest, and teaches respect by offering it first. Finally, the chapter concludes with a reminder that relationships are mirrors, and discipline helps you respond to what you see with grace, not judgment. Every difficult interaction is an opportunity to practice patience, compassion, restraint, and clarity. Self-discipline doesn't kill passion or spontaneity, it creates the safety and structure where love, trust, and deep connection can truly thrive. In a world where reactions are fast, emotions run high, and attention is short, the ability to stay grounded, communicate intentionally, and love with purpose is a rare and powerful discipline, one that not only improves your relationships but transforms who you are in the process. Chapter 7. Discipline for Health and Fitness. Dives deep into the critical role that self-discipline plays in achieving and maintaining long-term health and fitness, emphasizing that true well-being is not built on occasional bursts of motivation or fad diets but on the consistent, often unglamorous daily decisions we make about how we treat our bodies. The chapter opens by confronting the common misconception that health and fitness require perfection, perfect meals, perfect workouts, perfect routines, and instead reframes it as a lifelong relationship between you and your body that is strengthened through small, deliberate acts of care, restraint, and effort. It explores the psychology behind why so many people struggle to stick to health-related goals, citing reasons like emotional eating, instant gratification, all-or-nothing thinking, and societal pressure for quick results, and it argues that discipline is the antidote to these patterns. One of the key themes is that discipline bridges the gap between short-term comfort and long-term reward. When you choose to wake up early to exercise, to say no to fast food, to stretch instead of scrolling, you're actively choosing your future self over fleeting impulses. The author explains how our brains are wired to avoid discomfort and seek immediate pleasure, which makes healthy behaviors, often more difficult and less instantly rewarding, easy to delay or abandon. This is where the power of habit formation and environmental design becomes essential. By creating systems and surroundings that make healthy choices easier and automatic, you reduce the mental resistance associated with doing the hard things. The chapter gives examples such as meal prepping on Sundays to avoid impulsive eating, laying out workout clothes the night before, keeping water bottles within reach, or scheduling workouts as non-negotiable appointments. It highlights that willpower is finite, especially when you're tired, stressed, or busy, so discipline isn't about constant internal struggle but about setting up your life to require less of it. The chapter then turns to the foundational habits of health: nutrition, movement, sleep, and recovery, emphasizing that consistency in these areas matters more than intensity. With food, the author debunks extreme dieting mentalities and promotes mindful, balanced eating rooted in nourishment rather than restriction. Discipline here means eating with awareness, controlling portion sizes, planning ahead, and learning to say no without guilt. It also means resisting emotional eating and becoming aware of the triggers that lead to it, whether it's stress, boredom, sadness, or even celebration. In terms of exercise, the author urges listeners to shift their focus from aesthetics to longevity and functionality. Discipline in fitness is not about six-packs or punishing workouts, but about committing to regular movement, whether that's walking, strength training, yoga, or dancing, that supports your body's strength, flexibility, and endurance. The idea is that something is always better than nothing, and showing up consistently, even for 20 minutes a day, will compound over time and bring transformative results. The author discusses the common excuse of not having time, and reframes it by stating that discipline is about making time, waking up earlier, saying no to less important activities, and prioritizing self-care not as a luxury but a necessity. The chapter also emphasizes the importance of sleep and recovery, which are often sacrificed in the pursuit of productivity, yet are essential for physical and mental health. Discipline means setting a bedtime, avoiding screens before sleep, and honoring your body's need to rest and repair. Without proper recovery, even the most disciplined workout routine can lead to burnout or injury. There's also a powerful section on mental discipline and body image, where the author encourages listeners to avoid comparing themselves to others, to reject toxic fitness culture, and to instead focus on becoming stronger, more energized, and more in tune with their bodies. Discipline in this context also means having the patience to trust the process, to stick with your healthy habits even when results are not immediately visible, and to resist the temptation of shortcuts that promise fast results but deliver little sustainability. The author reinforces that true discipline is deeply compassionate. It's saying yes to yourself in the long term, even if it feels like a no in the moment. There's also a discussion on using goals to create momentum, setting smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals for your health journey, and then using systems to support those goals. For example, instead of just saying, "I want to lose weight," a more disciplined approach is to say, "I will go to the gym 4 times a week and track my meals for 30 days. These clear actions create a roadmap and make it easier to stay accountable. The chapter stresses the importance of tracking progress, not just through weight or appearance, but through energy levels, mood, sleep quality, strength gains, and consistency. It also recommends building a supportive community, surrounding yourself with people who support your goals, whether that's a workout buddy, a coach, a friend group, or even an online fitness community, because discipline thrives in environments of encouragement and shared accountability. The author closes the chapter with a powerful reminder that your body is your home, and how you treat it shapes not only your health but your self-esteem, confidence, and ability to show up fully in life. Discipline in health and fitness isn't about obsession, it's about respect. Respect for your body's potential, its needs, and the incredible things it allows you to do. It's a form of self-love that says, "I care about myself enough to take action even when it's not easy." Ultimately, this chapter makes the case that being fit and healthy isn't about genetics or luck. It's about discipline. It's about showing up again and again not because you always feel like it, but because you've decided that your future is worth the effort. And over time, those disciplined choices stop feeling like sacrifice and start feeling like freedom. Freedom from illness, fatigue, self-doubt, and the limits you once believed were permanent. Chapter 8. Financial Self-Discipline. Delves into the transformative power of financial self-discipline, showing that mastering your money is far less about how much you earn and far more about how you manage, prioritize, and control your financial behaviors over time. The author opens with a stark truth. Most people are not struggling financially because of a lack of income, but because of a lack of discipline. Impulse spending, emotional purchases, debt accumulation, lack of budgeting, and short-term gratification override long-term security. This chapter reframes money not just as a practical necessity, but as a mirror that reflects your habits, values, and mindset. Financial self-discipline means making intentional decisions with your money even when it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unpopular. It's about telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. The author stresses that creating wealth or even just achieving financial peace starts with taking full responsibility for your financial life, knowing what comes in, what goes out, and what's truly necessary versus impulsive. Budgeting is positioned not as a restriction, but as a form of financial freedom and clarity. A budget gives you control, awareness, and a plan. Discipline means sticking to that budget even when temptation arises, whether it's sales, flashy trends, eating out excessively, or upgrading to things you don't need just because others are doing it. The chapter emphasizes the danger of lifestyle inflation. When income increases but so do expenses, keeping you stuck in the same financial rut. Financial discipline means resisting that urge to level up, just for show, and instead using extra income to pay off debt, save, or invest. The author walks listeners through creating a basic financial plan, starting with building an emergency fund, at least 3 to 6 months of expenses, which provides a safety net and removes panic from unexpected situations. Next is debt management, understanding the real cost of interest, learning the discipline of making more than the minimum payment, and prioritizing debt repayment strategies like the snowball or avalanche method. The chapter cautions against credit card misuse, payday loans, and other predatory financial habits that seem convenient in the moment but create long-term chains. Financial self-discipline is also about learning to delay gratification, waiting to purchase something until you can afford it, saving slowly over time, and understanding that every financial decision is a trade-off. When you buy something today, you're giving up future options. When you invest or save, you're giving your future self more freedom. The author reinforces that wealth is built in the quiet, often invisible decisions. Skipping the daily coffee shop run, choosing a modest car over a luxury one, cooking at home instead of eating out, resisting the pressure to keep up with others. The chapter highlights that in the age of digital temptation, discipline is more important than ever. With one click, you can drain your bank account, sign up for a subscription you'll forget about, or buy something based on emotion rather than need. The author encourages listeners to implement intentional practices like the 24-hour rule, wait 24 hours before making non-essential purchases, using cash envelopes or automatic transfers to savings accounts. Automation, in fact, is praised as one of the most powerful tools for those looking to build discipline. It removes the friction and emotion from good habits by making them the default. Financial discipline also requires tracking, knowing your spending patterns, identifying problem areas, and reviewing your finances regularly to stay aware and accountable. Another key element is setting financial goals, whether it's saving for a house, becoming debt-free, building a retirement nest egg, or going on a trip without using credit, and then reverse engineering the steps needed to achieve them. The chapter explains how short-term sacrifices lead to long-term gains. Skipping a vacation this year to pay off your car might give you the breathing room to travel debt-free for the next 10 years. The author also introduces the concept of future you think, making decisions based not on how you feel today, but on how it will affect the version of you 1 year, 5 years, or even 20 years from now. This long-term perspective is what separates the financially disciplined from the chronically broke. One builds for freedom, the other feeds momentary comfort. The chapter also emphasizes mindset, moving from scarcity to abundance, developing gratitude for what you have rather than always craving more, and building self-worth that isn't tied to material possessions. The author addresses common emotional pitfalls, shopping to feel better, spending to impress, or equating financial success with self-worth, and encourages listeners to heal those habits through awareness, therapy, journaling, and values-based budgeting. One of the most powerful themes in this chapter is that every dollar is a decision and every purchase either brings you closer to your values or further away. Discipline is about aligning your money with what truly matters: freedom, security, generosity, or purpose, not status or comparison. Investing is also introduced here, not as a get-rich-quick scheme but as a disciplined, long-term strategy to build wealth slowly and steadily through compound interest. The author explains that starting early, staying consistent, and resisting the urge to panic during market drops is where real financial discipline shines. The disciplined investor doesn't chase trends or rely on hype. They stick to their plan, review their progress, and trust the process. Finally, the chapter ends by stressing that financial self-discipline isn't about deprivation, it's about liberation. It's not about never spending money, but about spending intentionally with clarity and peace of mind. True wealth isn't just about having money, it's about having options. The freedom to work or not work, to help others, to walk away from toxic environments, to retire with dignity, or to pursue dreams without being chained to debt. And all of that begins not with luck or income, but with discipline, the quiet, consistent practice of managing your resources with wisdom, purpose, and vision for a better future. Chapter 9. Staying consistent through challenge. Delves into the essential skill of maintaining consistency in the face of adversity, highlighting the fact that challenges, setbacks, and moments of difficulty are an inevitable part of any journey toward success, growth, or self-improvement, and that discipline is the tool that allows us to persevere through these trials. The author opens by acknowledging that life is rarely a smooth, uninterrupted path. Everyone will face obstacles, whether they are personal, professional, financial, or emotional, and these challenges can be demotivating and even discouraging. However, what separates those who succeed from those who falter is the ability to stay disciplined and consistent, even when the going gets tough. The chapter stresses that consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means showing up, day after day, despite the hurdles. It's about continuing to put in the work even when results are not immediately visible, and when doubt and frustration begin to creep in. The author encourages listeners to recognize that setbacks are not signs of failure but part of the learning process, and that discipline helps to reframe failure not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone to success. One key point the author emphasizes is the importance of adjusting your mindset during challenging times. Instead of allowing setbacks to define you, disciplined individuals choose to see challenges as temporary and surmountable. They maintain the belief that the difficulty they're facing is not permanent, and their effort will eventually pay off. The The chapter explores how challenges can trigger negative emotions like fear, frustration, anger, or self-doubt, and discusses how self-discipline can help manage these emotions, turning them into motivation rather than letting them derail progress. By focusing on what can be controlled, attitude, effort, and actions, a disciplined individual can weather the storm with resilience and keep pushing forward. The author emphasizes the importance of commitment to the process over commitment to the outcome. Often, when facing challenges, it's easy to become fixated on the desired result, whether it's a career goal, fitness milestone, or financial target, and when that goal seems distant or unattainable, it becomes tempting to quit. Discipline, however, means committing to the actions and habits that will get you there, even if the end result feels far off. It's about trusting the process and believing that the efforts will eventually yield rewards, even if those rewards are not immediately obvious. The chapter highlights accountability as another key factor in staying consistent through challenges. During tough times, it can be easy to give up when no one is watching or holding you accountable, but the author suggests building systems of accountability, such as having a workout partner, a mentor, or an accountability group, to help stay focused and motivated. Even self-accountability, such as journaling or tracking progress, can make a huge difference in staying consistent during difficult times. The author also emphasizes the power of small wins. When faced with overwhelming challenges, it's easy to feel paralyzed or disheartened, but the disciplined individual focuses on incremental progress. By breaking down a large goal into small, manageable tasks, you can create a series of small wins that accumulate over time, providing motivation and reinforcing the belief that forward movement is possible, no matter how slow it may seem. The chapter underscores the importance of creating routines and rituals that support consistency, even in tough times. When life gets chaotic, the comfort and structure of a daily routine can provide a sense of stability and normalcy, helping you stay on track with your goals. Whether it's setting aside time for exercise, dedicating a few minutes to mindfulness or journaling, or sticking to a regular sleep schedule, these small routines become anchors in turbulent times, allowing you to maintain focus and discipline amidst the chaos. Another powerful tool the chapter introduces is the practice of self-compassion. When facing challenges, it's easy to become overly critical of oneself, leading to feelings of inadequacy and discouragement. However, the author suggests that self-discipline isn't about beating yourself up when things go wrong. It's about being kind to yourself and understanding that setbacks are a normal part of life. By practicing self-compassion, you can remain resilient in the face of adversity, allowing yourself to experience failure without internalizing it as a personal flaw. The chapter also discusses how to stay consistent when external circumstances are outside of your control, whether it's a personal crisis, a health issue, or external economic factors. Here, the author stresses the importance of flexibility in maintaining discipline. While consistency is key, it's also important to recognize when adjustments need to be made. Instead of giving up entirely when facing obstacles, disciplined individuals find creative solutions or adapt their goals to the new reality. Flexibility allows you to pivot without losing sight of the end goal, adapting to circumstances while still adhering to the core principles of discipline. One concept the author touches upon is mental toughness, which is the ability to push through discomfort, setbacks, and challenges without losing focus on the long-term vision. Mental toughness is built by intentionally choosing the hard path, taking on challenges, doing difficult work, and resisting the urge to quit when things get tough. The chapter also explores the idea of reframing challenges. Instead of viewing them as insurmountable obstacles, a disciplined individual reframes them as opportunities to grow, learn, and prove their resilience. Reframing transforms difficulty into a tool for personal development, making challenges a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. The chapter closes with the idea that consistency through challenges is a practice, not a one-time event. It's about showing up every day, committing to the process, and trusting that with persistence and patience, the hard times will pass, and the goals will eventually be achieved. By building small daily habits and committing to the long-term vision, anyone can develop the self-discipline needed to overcome challenges and remain consistent through the ups and downs of life. The author reminds listeners that challenges are a natural part of the human experience, but they do not define us. What defines us is how we choose to respond to those challenges, whether we allow them to break our discipline or whether we use them to strengthen it. True success comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from meeting it with resilience, determination, and unwavering consistency. Chapter 10. Long-term vision and goal setting. Dives into the powerful relationship between having a long-term vision and the discipline required to set and achieve meaningful goals, emphasizing that without a clear, compelling vision for the future, the journey of self-discipline lacks direction and purpose. The author opens by discussing the importance of vision as a guiding force in life, arguing that without a vision, it's easy to become distracted by short-term pleasures, setbacks, or the immediate demands of life. A long-term vision provides the why behind the actions you take today, making it easier to stay disciplined even when motivation wanes. The chapter explains that vision is not merely wishful thinking, but a roadmap for the future, something that pulls you toward it with purpose and clarity. A strong vision encompasses the big picture of your life, your career, health, relationships, finances, personal growth, and contribution to the world, and provides a sense of direction that drives daily choices and actions. The author emphasizes that while vision is essential, it's not enough to simply have a dream of the future. It must be complemented by a well-defined goal-setting process to transform that vision into reality. Goals, according to the author, are the bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. The chapter stresses the importance of setting clear, specific, and actionable goals, outlining the need to break down larger, abstract dreams into smaller, tangible objectives that can be pursued step by step. The author introduces the SMART goal framework, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, as a way to ensure that goals are structured in a way that makes them achievable. A goal like, I want to be fit, is vague and easily abandoned, but a SMART goal like, I will work out 3 times a week for 30 minutes for the next 12 weeks, is clear, actionable, and measurable, increasing the likelihood of success. Furthermore, the chapter discusses the importance of setting both short-term and long-term goals. Short-term goals serve as milestones that keep you motivated and provide a sense of progress, while long-term goals keep you focused on the bigger picture and help you avoid getting lost in the small details. The author highlights that long-term goals are often driven by a deep personal or professional vision, such as financial independence, health and vitality, building a business, or making a positive impact on others. It's these overarching goals that keep you aligned with your purpose, even when daily life feels mundane or difficult. One of the key insights in the chapter is the idea that goals are not just about outcomes, but about the person you become in the process of achieving them. The author encourages listeners to focus on the character traits and skills they are developing through their pursuit of goals: perseverance, resilience, time management, creativity, and problem-solving. The journey of working toward a goal is as important as the goal itself because it shapes who you are and prepares you for even greater achievements in the future. The chapter also addresses the inevitability of obstacles and setbacks along the way and the importance of maintaining discipline through these challenges. Discipline, the author explains, is the ability to keep working toward your goals despite difficulties, delays, and distractions. It's about staying committed to your vision and breaking down barriers when they arise, instead of abandoning the goal or becoming discouraged. The author talks about the concept of adaptability, how being flexible with your methods while staying firm on your end goal is crucial for maintaining progress. If something isn't working, it's not a failure, but an opportunity to reassess and find a better approach, and being adaptable helps you stay on track without losing sight of the long-term vision. In this context, consistency is key. Small, incremental actions compound over time, and long-term success is built through the persistence of consistent effort. The chapter also explores the idea of visualization as a powerful tool for staying connected to your long-term vision. By regularly visualizing the outcome of your goals, what achieving them would look, feel, and sound like, you create a mental picture that strengthens your desire and commitment to bring them to life. Visualization helps reinforce the why behind your efforts, keeping you motivated through challenges. Additionally, the chapter delves into the importance of tracking progress toward long-term goals, emphasizing that tracking allows you to see how far you've come and what adjustments need to be made. Whether through journaling, spreadsheets, or regular check-ins, measuring progress reinforces consistency and shows you what's working and what isn't. The author suggests breaking larger goals into quarterly or monthly targets to maintain focus and momentum, and to celebrate small wins along the way to keep motivation high. Accountability is another critical component discussed in the chapter. Sharing your long-term vision and goals with others, whether through a mentor, friend, or community, adds an extra layer of commitment and responsibility. Accountability partners can help you stay on track, offer feedback, and provide encouragement, especially when the path feels difficult or uncertain. The author emphasizes that people who share their goals are more likely to achieve them because they are motivated by the desire to fulfill their commitments. The chapter also acknowledges the importance of self-reflection and periodically reassessing your goals to ensure they still align with your evolving values and circumstances. Life is dynamic, and sometimes what seemed like a crucial long-term goal 5 years ago may no longer be relevant. Regular reflection allows you to stay aligned with your true desires and adjust your goals as necessary to reflect the person you are becoming. The author also discusses the significance of celebrating progress, not just waiting for the end goal to be achieved. Celebrating the small wins along the way helps maintain enthusiasm and acknowledges the effort you're putting in, reinforcing your commitment to the process. The chapter concludes by reiterating that long-term success requires a balance of vision, discipline, and consistent action. A clear vision gives you the direction and motivation to keep going, while well-defined goals create measurable steps toward that vision. Discipline is the glue that holds it all together, enabling you to stay consistent, persevere through challenges, and ultimately achieve the life you envision for yourself. The author leaves listeners with a final thought. Your long-term vision is not just a dream, but a guide that, when paired with disciplined goal setting and action, transforms into a reality far greater than you ever imagined. Conclusion. In the conclusion of Self-Discipline, the author brings together the core principles discussed throughout the book, offering a final call to action for the listener to integrate the lessons into their daily lives and embrace the transformative power of discipline. The author reflects on the journey of self-discipline as not just a set of strategies or techniques, but as a lifelong commitment to personal growth, resilience, and success. The conclusion underscores that discipline is not an innate trait but a skill that can be developed and strengthened over time through consistent practice and commitment. It acknowledges that while self-discipline may feel challenging, especially in the early stages, the rewards are immense and well worth the effort. The author reminds the listener that achieving any meaningful goal, whether related to health, career, relationships, finances, or personal growth, requires discipline as the foundational element. Without it, even the most ambitious goals can falter due to lack of persistence, focus, or delayed gratification. The conclusion also brings into focus the idea that self-discipline is not about restriction or deprivation. Rather, it is about creating a life of freedom and choice. When you master your impulses, avoid distractions, and make deliberate choices aligned with your goals, you gain the power to design your life in a way that reflects your true values and aspirations. The author stresses that self-discipline is not about rigid perfection but about progress and consistency. It's about showing up for yourself day after day, even when motivation wanes or when life throws challenges your way. The key takeaway is that the pursuit of self-discipline is a journey, not a destination. It requires patience, self-compassion, and the ability to stay focused on the long-term vision, even in the face of setbacks. The conclusion also emphasizes the importance of mindset in cultivating discipline. Your thoughts and beliefs directly influence your actions and your ability to stay disciplined. Developing a mindset that views challenges as opportunities, sees failure as a learning experience, and understands that short-term discomfort often leads to long-term success, is essential for staying the course. The author reminds the listener that discipline is not a one-time effort but a habit that must be cultivated daily. From morning routines to the management of finances, from fitness to relationships, self-discipline must be consistently applied in every area of life. As the chapter draws to a close, the author calls on listeners to take ownership of their goals and their life choices, recognizing that every decision made today shapes the future. They emphasize that you are in control of your actions, and it's up to you to create the discipline needed to turn your vision into reality. The conclusion offers a final reflection on the idea that while external circumstances can influence outcomes, true self-discipline comes from within. It is a decision to take responsibility for your actions and to take charge of your destiny, regardless of the obstacles or distractions that may arise. The author also addresses the critical importance of self-awareness in the process of building discipline. Understanding your strengths, weaknesses, triggers, and habits is essential for effectively applying discipline. By identifying areas where you struggle and being honest with yourself about your challenges, you can tailor your approach to discipline in a way that is both sustainable and effective. The conclusion closes with a call to action, encouraging the listener to take the lessons learned and apply them with urgency and commitment. Whether it's starting with small daily habits or setting clear, measurable goals, the most important step is to begin. The author stresses that the journey towards self-discipline is ongoing, and it's not about achieving perfection but about making progress, getting better each day, learning from mistakes, and building momentum toward your desired outcomes. The final message is that the power to create the life you want lies within your own hands, and that self-discipline is the tool that unlocks your potential and sets you on the path to lasting success. Ultimately, the author leaves the listener with the reminder that life is full of choices, and the practice of self-discipline empowers you to make the best ones for your future. It is a process of aligning your actions with your values, holding yourself accountable to your commitments, and remaining focused on the long-term vision, even when the road gets tough. With discipline, you not only achieve your goals, but you also become the person you aspire to be, resilient, focused, and capable of overcoming any obstacle in your way. By cultivating and strengthening your self-discipline, you take ownership of your life, chart your own course, and create the future you desire. The conclusion ultimately reinforces the idea that self-discipline is not a burden, but a powerful tool for living a life of purpose, fulfillment, and success, and encourages the listener to commit to the journey of becoming the best version of themselves through consistent and intentional action.